So I grew up really religious, and Heather did not.
I didn't grow up being required to go to church.
3 years old is when I accepted Jesus into my heart.
Felt like it was so wrong not to be a Christian. Like, no offense, but I am not the silly goose in this situation.
I couldn't watch Nick Jr. Heather has a bone to pick with that.
I do have a bone to pick because everything is so contradictory in my opinion. Love your
Like-
neighbor as long as they're not gay. Like, where's the asterisk?
She says, I am actually religious and you're offending me. What do you think about God?
You can choose a life of celibacy. Doesn't that sound nice?
Daddy drinking that juice.
So welcome back to the Gab.
We have another new little segment that we want to try.
Yeah.
Welcome to Versus.
Where we square off and fight
beat
one
the
another.
shit out of each other. Oh.
Intellectually.
We don't even do that. Basically, Sid and I are in love. And we live together. And we're going to be together forever. And we were brought up in two very different ways. And we think that it's very interesting. And not only just being brought up in two different ways, our life experiences leading up to meeting each other have been very different.
Yeah.
And we think that that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell the people what we're talking about today?
Yeah, we're the first verses we're gonna do. We're gonna do growing up religious versus growing up not religious.
Yeah.
So I grew up really religious, and Heather did not.
Correct. It's not like I didn't grow up in like an atheist household. It's not like
You had some experiences with church,
right,
but it wasn't like a.
It wasn't coming from my parents, and it's
it wasn't
not even
a regular. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. It wasn't like a consistent thing in your life.
I didn't grow up being required to go to church. I haven't really talked about religion with my dad very much, so I can't really speak to that as much, but me and my mom have talked about it a lot. So it's not that my mom isn't a believer. Yeah, I didn't grow up being forced to go to church on Sundays.
Yeah.
I want to say there was like a year or two where we did really try going, and it just never stuck. Like,
well, and one of the reasons that I think you've shared with me is that I think pretty much everyone in your family felt not super like welcomed, or just kind of felt like judged maybe.
I don't even know that it was judged, but yeah, I mean, I didn't even realize until talking to my mom fairly recently when we were kind of having this discussion. Like, I don't really want to tell her stories because that's just not really for me to tell. But basically, she just had some bad experiences with people in church. And I know the church that we tried going to was very cliquey in terms of like the school system that went there. It was like all people that went to school together as well, and I didn't go to that school, so it was just very cliquey. And like I would go weird. And I would just like, I didn't like it. Like I'd go on Wednesday and I was just so painfully shy at that point. And I would just kind of sit there and not talk to anyone and not be talked to. And I think that like really pissed my mom off, because she's like, why are these Sunday school teachers not making sure that all these kids are included and being talked to and aren't sitting by themselves? Like, this is kind of like the opposite of what you would expect to be happening.
Well, I mean, in that, like, I think I've shared with you, I went to the same church my entire life. Like, my mom was going there before I was born. And we went there until I was 19. All that to say, like, I wasn't some of the kids went to school together, some of them went to different schools, but I was homeschooled. So I was like I just always felt like the odd one out. And I literally went there. I knew a lot of these kids my entire life, but I still wasn't included, mostly because same thing, like I was so painfully shy. I felt like so out of the loop with all of the things that all of the media that they were. I was just so out of the loop. I was so
you couldn't even like
sheltered and homeschooled. Like I didn't know what the fuck was going on, and so I was so afraid to like branch out and socialize with them because I was so afraid to embarrass myself because I just like didn't know. But anyway, no, like it's pretty crazy though too that like I went there my entire life. Like the staff knew me, the other kids knew me, and yeah, like I wasn't included in like it was so cliquey.
It's so sad. And like
later high school, I branched out more and I was able to like feel included and make some friendships at my church. But middle school, early high school, Really not at all.
To summarize my like growing up experience, like I said, we attempted for a little while. We were going. It didn't stick. My mom had some bad experiences with people that she was interacting with. And then I was just so shy. And then, so it just, we eventually just like stopped going. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
I think my mom even told me on the phone, she was like, you basically got to the point where you were like, I'll go, but I don't want to go to Sunday school. Like, I just want to go to big church. Like, we'd call it big church and Sunday school. So I would just like, I want to go to big church. I don't want to go to Sunday school. And how sad is that? I didn't want to go hang out with the kids that were my age because I didn't feel welcome in church.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like it was fun. Like, I felt like I was going to be sitting by myself. Like, that's so gross.
I know I definitely did that some in middle school and stuff too. Oh, where I would say that to my mom and like she was fine with that. But then I was sitting in like the adult sermon, like not engaged. Like I literally just was sitting there.
Yep. Big old waste of time if you ask me for a kid.
Yeah. Well,
but so yeah, so we tried. I would go to big church and then we just stopped going. And then little like school stuff, there's like FCA and I was playing sports. So mainly like in high school, there was a little stint where I was going mainly on Wednesdays. I think I went on some Sundays, but I was really going on Wednesdays mainly. So I definitely had a little period of time for a couple years at least.
good old Wednesday youth group.
Little youth group. One funny story, which I want to tell now before I forget, is I was dating a guy, I think it would have been my junior year. We didn't date very long. He ended up just like fully ghosting me, which is so funny to think about now, actually. I feel like we like really liked each other for a little while, but I brought him to church and like I was going, but I wasn't putting my hand up. I wasn't feeling calls from God. Like I wasn't feeling any of that. I was like sitting there in church like, am I like missing something? Like I wanted that to be happening. I was like trying, but I wasn't. It was never a thing for me. But I brought him on like a random Wednesday, and it just so happened to be the Wednesday they talked about like sex, and they broke us up into like guys and girls.
Of course it was.
And he probably thought I like planned that. And I didn't. Like, I definitely wasn't ready to have sex in high school, so I'm glad that we didn't. But it certainly wasn't long after that he just stopped texting me. And I think he basically figured out I wasn't going to have sex with him. Honestly, like, if we had dated for a while, I probably would have. I just, like, hadn't yet, and I didn't really want to.
Right.
So I thought that was so funny that I brought, and I was just like, oh my God. Like, that was absolutely not planned. I did not know they were going to do that. Even that's uncomfortable for me. Like, I never got the true love weight string, none of that. Like, I don't know. I was trying to do what everybody else was doing. I was trying to do what I thought was right, and it just never was much of a thing for me. So that's kind of mine. Like, I ended up going to a small Christian college my first semester because I thought, oh, I want the small college experience. Yeah, I wanted to, like, know everyone, and I was still kind of in the church at that time. I was never like, it's not like I was like leader of anything or whatever, but I was like I was trying. And then it was like I graduated. Obviously I was already going to Union University as the school, but when I graduated high school, that's when I like smoked weed for the first time, and I like started, like, I drank for the first time on my senior trip and like got drunk for the first time. And so it was like I was going to this college, it was a Christian school, but I graduated high school and I experienced all these things that were like would be very looked down upon from a church standpoint. And I realized like, oh, these things aren't that big of a deal. So then that was where it was tough. Like I went to this college and then I found myself like, oh my God, like what have I gotten myself into? And then I visited like UT for the first time and I was like, I have to transfer. I even tried going to like a small Christian college and like I couldn't. Like I never have felt I wasn't even out at that time, nor did I even consider the fact that I might be gay.
Yeah.
Like, and it would not have been okay for me to be gay at that school.
Yeah.
Like, at all. Would have been, like, could have gotten kicked out.
Before I transferred to Belmont, there were only a couple other schools that I was even looking at, and I never even finished my applications for them. But there was one school that I was interested in California, and it was a Christian school. And I was like almost done with the application, and I got to the end. And at this point, before I was going to Belmont, like I was considering coming out before like going into, but then I didn't for some reason. I like waited, but that's besides the point. I read this, I had to sign this thing at the end that was like basically saying that number one, I wouldn't engage in homosexual activity. And number two, if I found out that someone else was engaging in homosexual activity, I would report them. And I was like,
no, that was part of the application process.
I can't make this up. I can't make this up.
I don't even remember if anyone from Union happens to be watching. Was that part of our? I don't remember that.
It was like
being part of it for me.
I'm trying to remember. It was kind of, the language was like kind of disguising it, but at the same time it really wasn't. Like it was very clear to me. I remember because I was very interested in, like, this school was I want to say
the school. Call them out. That's fucking gross.
It was Azusa Pacific. So it was like near the beach, I'm pretty sure, and I was like, that would be so cool. Like, ugh. I would love. And so it was literally
does anyone happen to be watching this? Do they still have that as part of the application process? What?
I don't know. This would have been 2017 when I was applying.
I mean, I guess it's not that crazy for a religious institution,
no.
But oh my gosh.
No, it's sadly it's not. But anyway, so I remember the application was fully done. And then I got to that and I was like, I'm not signing that shit. Like, even if I'm not going to come out, like, I'm not going to sign. Like, obviously, I guess I'm sure there's people that sign it and then, like, they don't give a fuck if someone else is, like, doing gay shit. Like, I'm sure. But I was like, I'm not signing that. I'm not giving my money to this. Like, that's crazy.
Ew, that's
so
gross behavior. Yeah, it's literally being, like, saying you're going to out someone. That's not only, like, super dangerous for some people. Like, that's... God. That's why I'm not religious. Like, that right there. Great example of why.
I mean, there it's nuanced. Like, there's religious people that aren't like that. But I know. Yes, I get what you're saying.
But still. But there's also religious people who aren't like that, but they're also like, I don't know.
They're like neutral about it, yeah.
Or not even that, but they're like, I don't know. Can't find anything that says it's okay. Right?
Right. So, yeah, you're right.
And that I have a problem with.
Heather has a bone to pick with that.
I do have a bone to pick because everything is so contradictory in my opinion.
It is contradictory for sure. I think...
Love your neighbor as long as they're not gay. Like, what? Where's the asterisk?
I think when you... Like, I'm still breaking out of some of the things that were, like, so ingrained in me. And I think, excuse some behaviors that I know are not okay. Because I'm like, well, these people, like, genuinely do think that they're coming from a good place. Not that that's, again, it's not an excuse, but, like, there are certain things where I'm like, this is well-intended. This is like, because I know that because I've been in it and I've witnessed, like, people that I love, like, have good intentions and do or say things that are just, like, really
hateful as fuck,
unkind and unfair, like...
And that's the thing. Yeah, maybe I should clarify. Like, it's not even like religious people that I have a problem with. It's just like religion and what religion makes people do, and what religion makes people justify as being okay in the name of God.
Yeah.
Okay, baby. Like, so you grew up. I mean, from as long as you can remember going to church. Was there like a switch, or like you were like a baby in the nursery of church?
Oh no, I was a baby in the nursery. Okay. And I remember my mom always used to tell this story of, like, when I was a little tiny baby, one of the women that worked in the nursery, like, gave me back to her after a service and, like, told her that I was an old soul. And
you are an old soul, babe.
I don't know, I think I'm like a middle-aged soul.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm like an old soul.
Middle-aged soul.
But I don't think I'm a young soul.
You're just smack dab in the middle.
I like to think I'm a middle-aged soul. You talk about, like, third place. Mm-hmm. Like, the church was definitely, like...
Your third place?
The third...
Or your family's third
place? Well,
place?
It's just interesting because thinking back, I never felt comfortable or at home there, even though I was there so much. I just couldn't,
so
like... I didn't feel like I fit. It's not that I felt, like, totally uncomfortable there. Yeah. I think I felt more comfortable as a kid, but then once I started getting to, like, late elementary school, middle school, Middle school was the worst because it was like all of a sudden going to church was like a freaking popularity contest. It was so stupid. And like I was homeschooled. I was super shy. I was super sheltered. Yeah, it was like I just feel like church, but again, like middle schoolers are going to be middle schoolers, and it's the responsibility of like the leaders to make sure that like things aren't cliquey and like every kid is feeling welcome and every kid's feeling included, and like
yes, that shit is absolutely on the leaders.
We had some, it's not that we didn't have good leaders, like it's not that anybody was like a bad person or anything. It was just like, I don't know, I would just get when I was there, like my stomach would hurt so bad. I would have horrible anxiety and my stomach would be in knots because I just felt like I didn't fit in and I didn't want to be there. And like, it didn't have at that time, it didn't have anything to do with like not wanting a part of faith or not. I just didn't want to be there with those kids.
Yeah, my biggest issue is generally like just kind of the church and the actions of the church and the inactions of a church.
Yeah.
And obviously we're not naive to the fact that this isn't everyone's experience, but I do think that it's a high percentage of people that feel this, and it should be talked about. And
I
people in
definitely
church
know.
now are talking about like numbers dropping and whatever, and it's kind of like this is why. Like, I think maybe if you actually put some weight into what's going on and why people are leaving the church, you would understand it a little bit more.
My best friend in high school went to a different church, and she started coming to my youth group because the girls at her youth group were so mean to her.
Yeah, like I'm so sorry. The church group shouldn't have a bully.
Well, it wasn't even. I don't know if I would say it was bullying. It was
being
like
mean and bullying.
Yeah,
like,
it was like they were. She went to a more conservative church than I did, but she was allowed. Like her parents didn't care if she wore makeup or wore leggings or like stuff like that. And the other girls that like weren't allowed to do those things like hated her because she would wear mascara and she would dress cute.
So you grew up in the nurse, like you grew up in church, like from as long as you can remember.
Yes.
Like
every Sunday. If we missed a Sunday, it was we were on vacation or someone in the family was like super sick. No, we did not miss church.
So you couldn't wake up and just want to be like, I want to have a chill morning and like I want to lay around. I don't want to go.
If I did, it was a major problem.
Oh, God.
It was a major, yeah, because it was just the expectation, which I mean,
it's so interesting like to think through that and kind of be like, mainly because people want to talk about the queer community and say it's grooming and all of this different stuff. I don't know. It's just like, it's so interesting when you think about it in terms of just like forcing someone to go being a kid. It just sucks. Like as a kid, how you really don't have any say over your time and like what you're doing and like
it was
being
hard
forced
because
into a belief system.
As a kid, as much as I could get my brain around things, because I mean, realistically, even when you're a teenager, I feel like you can't get your brain around like what you're believing in, what you're subscribing to. You're just doing it because that's what you're being taught. But I never was opposed. Like my brother, for instance, by the time my brother was in high school, he was like, I don't believe in this. And I was never in that camp as
I wasn't either
a kid or older. Like I very much believed in all of it. And I wouldn't say I always felt like I wasn't doing enough. I remember I would go, I think maybe 3 summers in high school I went. There was a church camp, like a sleepaway camp. And it was like a camp, but it was also just like it was like a student conference. I remember one year, the group that went, they challenged us to do this like year-long, like you read the whole Bible in a year. So the idea is that you read a little bit every day. Obviously, if you miss a day, you can catch up.
Yeah.
A lot of people committed to it. A few people did it, but most people failed and fell off. I didn't even commit to it. I was like, there's no way I'm doing that. I'm not even going to pretend like I'm going to be able to do that.
Oh, I took an Old Testament class at Union, like I was required to take, and I remember nothing from it. I never did most of the time I did not do the required reading.
Right,
Yeah,
but I'm saying like
couldn't.
you were reading the entire Bible.
No, I know. I'm saying I couldn't even do the Old Testament. Like
I would like read the Bible sometimes.
Oh,
but
no.
I always knew I wasn't reading the Bible enough. I wasn't praying enough. Like I did pray, but not enough. And I just always felt, and then what would happen is like when I would go to like these conferences and stuff, or just kind of randomly if something difficult was going on with my family or whatever it was, I would have these kind of come to Jesus moments where I would be like, this is it. I finally understand like what I've been missing. But it was just like this spiritual high that would like go away after a week or two. And that is simply in the case of the like camps and whatever, like that's just kind of like emotional manipulation. Like they would get you to like talk about your struggles, talk about like if you had difficult stuff going on at home, whatever. And then they would be like, who wants to accept Jesus? And it's just kind of like, dude,
like everyone's bowing, like everyone's like closing their eyes and praying and have to like raise their hand for stuff. Like
it's one thing to want to like teach kids and teenagers about the faith, but to be like preying on their feelings and
forcing
saying
them into
like,
it.
who wants to step to the front in front of all your peers and say that you've accepted God? Like what?
And honestly, like a child comes to their parent and, you know, says like they want to get baptized and that they accept the Lord as their one and only Savior. I am so.
Oh, you want to know when I did that?
Probably so young.
3 years old is when I accepted Jesus into my heart.
And my favorite thing is like, and parents take that with such weight, like their kid knows and like can grasp what that means, and then their kid comes to them with something else, like, and they're just a kid, like they can't. It's like for some reason, in my opinion, when a kid says different things that has to do with like church or God or religion, like believe them, like we trust them, like they know exactly what they're talking about, but like everything else, they're just a kid.
Well, yeah.
And it's like, what do you really think this child can like fathom what it is that they're like believing? And all I know is now that I think about it in my adult life, for me, I think what was happening is I was like scared not to believe. Like it felt like it was so wrong not to be a Christian and not to believe in God. So it was just kind of like I was just like going along with it.
Well, I grew up, it's interesting because you grew up in the Bible Belt. So
I grew
most
up
people
here in
around you
Nashville,
were
outside.
some level of Christian.
Yeah.
I grew up in like near DC, so it was a lot more secular, a lot more diverse in terms of religion, but my community specifically, because I was homeschooled, because I was in the church, I had very few people around me who were not Christians. So
that was me. Yeah, growing up here, it is kind of like you're wild if you're not a believer, and it just felt so wrong. Like it just was like, oh yeah, immediately hell if you don't. And it was just like, so
hell now.
Hell, yeah, that's where you're headed. But turns out I'd be headed there anyways, even if I believed, because I'm gay. So
I don't know.
I don't believe in
I
hell,
think
though.
some Christians believe that you're automatically going to go to hell if you're gay, but some don't, because some are like, well, it's no different than any other sin. But if you can choose a life of celibacy, doesn't that sound nice?
Yeah, and all those men in the churches who vow that celibacy are f***ing children and molesting kids. So I don't know that maybe we were built for that. Huh? Oh, sorry. Should I not have gone there?
No, you're right.
Like that's another thing that's so crazy to me is it's like for there to be this religion that believes that we need to fight against just these natural urges that we have that like come from within, that's just like part of being a human, and all of a sudden we're bad if we can't, like, bish, like we are sexual beings.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think we should talk about purity culture a little bit.
I would love to. I wish aside from the one story that I already told about bringing my boyfriend to that one Wednesday, I don't remember a whole lot of what was being said. Like, I really just, like, was not absorbing much, I don't think. Like, I was just going because I felt like I had to, and I was, like, trying, but it wasn't hitting for me like it was seemingly for everyone else. Like, so I don't, which, I mean, honestly, thank God I don't, because I'm not scarred from it. Yeah, I didn't have, like, oh my God, I'm not allowed to have sex or whatever. I just was kind of uninterested in it. And yeah, I guess I just didn't feel like I was, like, mature enough. I just did not, and I also dated some pretty innocent people. Yeah. Had I dated, like, guys that were, you know, I don't know, sexually active, maybe it would have been different, but...
Yeah, no, I feel that. I think I was definitely interested in, like, boys and having a relationship, and then later in high school I realized I think this was what was difficult for me personally, is I was the same. I was never interested in having sex, but I think that I thought, like, oh, well, I'm just so pure, like, which I know I've heard a lot of people say the same experience. But then as I got to, like, late high school, I started, like, doing not sex, but, like, stuff.
You started doing sex?
I started doing sex. No. I wasn't having sex in high school, but, like,
same.
I was doing stuff. But unfortunately, like, it wasn't my idea. It was kind of like I don't know. It's so hard. It's like, it was like a coercion situation, which I think just comes from, unfortunately, the guys that I dated, like, also being super repressed and then, like, not, you know, knowing that no one talking to them about that kind of stuff. Like, hey, whatever. So I, you know, can't really, I don't want to say any more about that, but anywho, yeah. So tough. I started, like, kind of dabbling in sexual encounters. And then I think once I was like, well, I've already done it. So it's like, I have to do this kind of thing. I don't know. And then, like, but then I realized that I wasn't, like, getting anything out of it. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know. But then, like, late high school was when I started having, like, sexual thoughts or, like, sexual urges about women. And that's when I was like, oh, wait a minute.
Oh my God, am I gay?
But it still took me a really long time. But yeah, it was like I don't know. I didn't have sex with a guy until college.
Same. It was like second semester.
It's not that it was, like, bad, but after it only happened a couple times, and then after we weren't together anymore, I didn't have the urge to, like, explore that with someone else. Like, I didn't feel like, oh, well, I want to. And then I started dating women.
Never looked back.
Never looked back.
Yeah, I never was having big sexual urges either. I just hate the message that churches are sending kids right now. And I agree with what you were saying earlier about the intentions being good, but I just wish that these people would put more time into considering how it's impacting these young kids and how much shame that they're going to go into life having if they have sex I've just heard tons of stories of people feeling so much shame surrounding sex, like even with their own,
they're married,
even with their own partner. And I wish that churches cared the damage that they were doing to these kids. And, like, honestly, like, in this situation, like, your intentions, like, your intentions don't matter, in my opinion, because you need to, like, actually sit back and consider. Like, my cousin was telling me, so the church that I went to this church on Wednesdays plenty of times. Luckily, I don't remember this, but her and her friends were telling me, like, because they remembered what was being taught. And it was basically like, anytime you have sex or do something sexual with a guy, you're, like, losing a petal off of your flower. and what are you gonna do when you get married? Or you're just gonna give your husband a stem? It just is so gross.
I was told that I was gonna have to apologize profusely to my husband on our wedding night if I'd ever done something sexual with another guy before marriage. Never was it mentioned that my husband would have to apologize to me if he had done something sexual.
It's always on the women.
I would have to say, honey, I'm so sorry. Like, this is as if I wouldn't talk about that with someone I was going to marry before we got married. Like, it wouldn't be on our wedding night. But, like, that was how it was phrased to me. And when you're, like, 11, 12 years old and you're starting to be told this stuff, you're thinking about, like, oh, my God, like, my husband would be so angry with me on our wedding night. Like, that is so damaging. Yeah, so I was taught it kind of like a thing where you have to honor your future husband in this way, which, oh my God. But
good thing you're gonna have a future wife.
Good thing. Where were we?
One thing that I wanted to make sure that we brought up was like praying before meals. So I did not grow up within my immediate family praying before meals. When we would get together for holidays, we would, but it wasn't something that we did. And my ex-husband's family prayed before every meal. And there were lots of times where I would just like completely forget that was part of it, and I would just like go ahead and start eating. And I can just remember like the looks that I would be given, like the audacity. It just is like, can we chill? Also, just this is hard for me to, how do I say this? It's like there's this balance of like respecting someone's religion, but I feel like there's not really a whole lot of respect given from the other side of things of this person's not religious. They're not really required to participate in our stuff. But there's an unspoken requirement of you will participate in this prayer. I understand that there's like a respect component to it, but like, why is it that I am all of a sudden required to be a part of that when I don't have the same beliefs? Now, which we haven't even said, I believe in something. Like, I hope that this is an all for nothing. I definitely don't believe in like the God that church people are talking about, but I do believe in something, and I hope that there's some bigger purpose.
Well, I grew up in a family where we prayed before every meal, whether we were at home, whether we were at a restaurant, like
that was his
prayer
family.
before every meal for sure. And definitely like if there was a bite taken before the prayer, it wasn't like a huge deal, but it was definitely like, can you wait 1 sec? Like, we haven't prayed. Like, girl, I just wanted a bite.
It's like, so like childish.
I'm literally like 8 years old. I want a freaking bite of potato.
It's almost a form of control too, for like, in my opinion, it's like a form of control from like an elder to like a kid or to other people. It's this like, I'm going to use my religion to be in control of you in a way. And I know that seems like drastic and dramatic, sure. But that's just like how it felt to be on the other side of it, to have these people that are like,
yeah,
what are you, or like laughing almost. And it's like, no offense, but I am not the silly goose in this situation. You know, like, just because I want to eat my food without thanking the sky daddy above. Like, I'm not the silly goose. Don't laugh at me.
Right. Well, I will say, like, at home is one thing. Like, I do kind of believe, like, okay, if your parents are putting a roof over your head and putting food on the table and they want you to pray before the meal in their house, like, sure, you do it, right? Like, that's just how it is.
Still weird to me.
I don't want to parent my kids like that, but I get the principle of it. But at a restaurant, I'm like, there is nothing worse than praying at the table and the waiter not realizing you're praying and coming up and like trying to fill your water. Also, like,
always
now
so
that
awkward.
I'm a server, like, it's only happened to me, I think, one time. But one time I went up to a table and they were praying and I didn't realize.
You were triggered.
And it was so uncomfortable. I was like, oh my God. And I just like walked away. I'm not saying that like you shouldn't pray at a restaurant if that's what you want to do. I'm just saying it's like, I don't know. I just remember when I was growing up, like always feeling so honestly just embarrassed. Like,
Yeah.
that we were sitting there praying at a restaurant. I don't know. It just felt really weird to me.
And also, there's lots of like prefaces and clarifications happening, but like I don't have a problem with people who pray. Like my whole point with all of this,
I just don't want to do it in
don't
public.
don't force other people to do it. Like if that's what you do, bow your head, pray, then eat. But to have to make it this group thing where I just don't like that. Like, I don't like feeling like I'm, like, being forced in to participate in this religion that I don't participate in.
Right.
And I totally respect anybody who is religious and wants to do that. Do that. But don't look down on me that I don't, and don't force me to participate.
I feel
I wouldn't force you to not pray. I would never be like, don't do that.
I could be wrong about this, but at least from what I've gathered, the Christian religion is kind of the only religion that's doing that.
Absolutely.
Like other religions aren't like it's like a personal thing. They're not trying to like push it on other people. They're not trying to like make other people feel like they may think like, oh, we know better, but they're not like exuding that, I feel like. Yeah. Whereas with Christians, it's like, oh, they just don't know. Like they don't know.
It's a big group.
We have to tell them.
It's, in my opinion, it's just the biggest group of not self-aware people like that I've ever come across. For there to be a big group of people saying not to force gayness on them and not to force all these things on them, not to force Black Lives Matter. Like, you force your religion on people constantly.
Well, it's if somebody it's a that's a projection. I really feel like that's a projection.
Something.
Because it's like if just existing as a gay person feels like forcing it on you, like that's really interesting, because you could exist as a Christian and I wouldn't give a crap, but it's like not that all Christians do that. They don't. But
yeah, it's like a
lot of them do.
No one in the queer community is complaining about you having a Bible verse on your shirt, but as soon as you have a rainbow on your shirt, then it's an issue.
Right.
Like, so that my whole thing with religion really is just like, if that's your thing, I love that for you so much, and I hope that it brings you so much happiness. It's not my thing, and I don't look down upon straight people for not being gay. I don't look like, it just is crazy. I don't need to be saved. What you have is a belief. It's not like, I don't know, it's not some scientifically proven stuff, you know? So it's not like you think that you're like saving me from something that you can't even prove is like a thing.
Yeah.
So it's just like, let it be your thing. Like, I love that it's your thing.
Well, the last thing we wanted to talk about is like religion in relation to what we were, like anything we were allowed to consume as kids. Meaning like TV, movies, music.
I don't remember there being strict boundaries on what I was like allowed to watch and not watch. Like, it's not like my parents were like, watch whatever, but I don't remember it being like a thing of you can't watch that. I don't remember that being a thing. I'm sure that they were keeping tabs of what I was watching, but like I was watching MTV, I was watching Disney Channel, like I was watching TV. Like my parents weren't, I don't think they were intensely monitoring what I was watching, but I'm sure that they were maybe aware and making sure, but there was no like, you can't watch rated R movies or like, I feel like I remember being young and watching Edward Scissorhands with my dad. Music with cussing in it. I don't think that they necessarily maybe loved it, but it wasn't like a you know what I mean? Like, so I just don't really have a memory of being told I couldn't watch something.
When I was like middle school, probably, I got really into Taylor Swift. Love Taylor Swift. I had an iPod, but I would get like the physical CDs, and my parents would listen to it and circle the songs that I could listen to. And like, no. I'm so serious. Like so I would be in my room listening to the CD, listening to the albums on a CD player, and I actually would skip. Eventually, after some years went by, I did listen to the ones that I wasn't supposed to listen to, and I was
what was
like,
wrong with
these
them?
are the best ones.
What was wrong with them? Taylor Swift, really?
Were too.
It took her a long time to even cuss in her music, I feel like.
Babe, it wasn't even about, I mean, cussing was one thing for sure, but it wasn't even about cussing. It was about like if a song felt too mature, like if there was like anything that could be taken as like something sexual or something. I think there was one song on her Fearless album. I think it's The Way I Loved You, and she says like, I miss screaming and fighting and kissing in the rain. Like I couldn't listen to that, like, because it was like something that I shouldn't. I don't know. It was
Religion
just,
makes people do crazy things. That's crazy.
well, and then TV, like I couldn't. There was only certain channels I could watch, like PBS and Boomerang. But I couldn't watch Disney Channel like until I was in middle school.
Literally made for kids.
Or maybe like a little bit. Maybe when I was like
Made
10 or
for
11,
kids.
I could watch Disney Channel. I couldn't watch Nick Jr. because they would show commercials for regular Nickelodeon. So I couldn't watch that. I
Also
couldn't.
made for kids.
It was just like, and this makes me sound so like I'm being mean or whatever, but like it was well intended. Like my mom was trying to protect me, but it ended up making me feel like I was just on the outside of like everything. I didn't know. Like I remember times when there would be like people would be going to the movie theater to see a movie for somebody's birthday, for a birthday party, and I wouldn't be allowed to go because I wouldn't be allowed to see the movie. Or if my friends were gonna have a sleepover, it was like, well, you have to get permit, like you have to know what movie we're, like it was just so like for me it's like I obviously want to monitor like what my kids one day are consuming, but it's like you can't protect your kids from, and a lot of the things that I was being protected from would have gone right over my head.
Absolutely.
As a kid.
But the other thing I was going to say is like it should be less about protection and more about education. You can sit down with your kid and watch something, and then when something that you see as controversial or whatever comes up, you use that as a time to educate them. Like if something, sexual,
Well, and I mean,
and you can kind of use that. But I'm really glad that you brought up this because the sheltering. Like, I fortunately did not grow up sheltered. Like, thank God. So I never felt like the outsider. I definitely felt shy and like I didn't maybe have a ton of friends because I was so shy. But it wasn't because I was sheltered.
what I will say is my experience with the sheltering, I think caused this like avoidance in me because I began to feel anxious once I knew what sex was.
Well, hi, Frank.
Which my mom sat me down and told me what sex was when I was like 8. But I still couldn't like,
That's something we should talk about.
yeah, we should.
Passport to purity.
But that's like a whole,
that might have to be a separate episode.
Oh, you gonna give him
but
a bath?
I still couldn't like hear any music or like see anything that had any type of like sexual innuendo or anything. So anytime there was something, like it would just make me so anxious. It would make me so anxious, and then I would be avoidant, and I would just feel so uncomfortable. Like I would feel so uncomfortable with everything. And so I think that there's a level of sheltering that's good, but the point to which I was sheltered, I think, did really do me a disservice because I was just, not only was I homeschooled, I couldn't relate to anything. Like I wasn't, like when I was elementary school, like all of the girls that I was friends with like loved Hannah Montana. I wasn't allowed to listen to Hannah Montana. So I would be like hanging out with them in their rooms and they would play Hannah Montana. And I remember this one time that I was like pretending like I knew the words to Hannah Montana because I was embarrassed and I didn't know. And then this girl was like, are you like pretending to know the words? And I was like, no, but I was.
Baby. Oh my God.
Oh man.
Which, yeah, I know what you mean on the like some level of sheltering. Bye, Frank. Being good. But like for me, that's like, yeah, sheltering your kids from like really intense stuff.
Well,
but
it
like
also,
I just want to like educate my kids. Kids have a lot more of an understanding of what's going on in life than people give them credit for. Like they can take it.
Yeah.
Kids can take learning about queer people. Kids can take learning about trans people. Kids can take that stuff. I don't know. It just, yeah, the sheltering is something I find myself getting like really infuriated by because I feel so bad for kids like you that like experience that. And like I can't imagine what that felt like as a kid to have to feel so on the outside. It's hard enough being like a middle school age kid, like, because kids are mean at that age. So for you to have been so intensely sheltered, just make it, I don't know, it just kind of makes it even worse. And then in my experience too, the kids that were super, super sheltered, they enter the real world college
and they
just
wild.
they either go buck wild,
and that's what I did,
or they absolutely just lose it and just can't cope. It's just like, don't shelter your kids so much to the point that they don't know how to cope once they're experiencing all the things you pretended weren't a thing.
Yeah.
Like, you can tell your kids, like, this is, you know, if you want to teach them, it's your kids, you get to teach them what you think is right and wrong, but, like, damn.
Not even pretended weren't a thing, but acted like we're so bad and scary, but, like, you kept them so distanced from it that it, like, felt like this way bigger thing that it actually was, and, like, everything was just, yeah, and that was me. Like, when I went to my first college, I went buck wild, and then I had no idea that there were people in the world that there was so much that I wasn't familiar with, people that were going to take advantage of me, people that were going to, like, make fun of me because I didn't know what the fuck was going on. Like, it just sucked. It really sucked. One thing that also makes me sad in the music aspect of things is, like, I didn't grow up with classic music. I didn't grow up hearing the music that my parents loved when they were younger. I only, like, now and then, the only music I can remember hearing that wasn't Christian music when I was young was we would listen to the Carpenters, which I, like, love, and then we would listen to ABBA, which also love. But other than that, like, I didn't grow, and I know my mom, like, loved Elton John and, like, David Bowie, like, when she was younger, but I never got to hear those things because it was, like, I don't know. That just makes me sad too, because when I hear people that I know talk about, like, oh, they grew up on the Beatles, they grew up on what, like, I never got to grow up on that stuff.
Yeah.
Even though my parents were listening to it.
You grew up on what, Casting Crowns?
Definitely. I saw Casting Crowns in concert, baby.
Wow.
Casting Crowns,
I bet that was a
Mercy Me,
religious experience. I mean, I loved Switchfoot. I loved Reliant K.
Zoe Girl.
But you didn't even grow up on Reliant K.
No, I didn't grow up
Which
on
makes me so sad.
Reliant K.
Because there at least was, like, more almost, like, punky alternative music that was, like,
there was some
Lifeway.
like that I listened. There was a couple bands that I'm not remembering the name that I listened to that were more, like, punky, like, Christian.
Like Switchfoot?
Yeah, some Switchfoot. There's one I'm not remembering the name of. But anyway.
Yeah, the
Barlow
thing,
Girl. Did you ever listen to Barlow Girl?
That sounds familiar, but I know, Frank. God, this is a topic we could talk about at length.
We
and
could
we
do another
talk
episode
about
on this at
at
some
length.
point.
Yeah, we could.
She says, hello, I just want to make sure I'm in all the episodes. She says, I am actually religious and you're offending me. What do you think about God?
I would love to hear everybody else's thoughts and experiences. And I think we all, at least if we weren't the person that, like, grew up in the youth group, then we know someone who did. And especially in our community, I think the last thing I want to point out with religion and stuff is just hearing fellow queer people and the awful experiences that they had, and, like, the intense therapy that they have to go through in their adult life because of the things that they went through from very religious people. And I did not experience it. Like, thank God.
Thank God. No pun intended.
Pun fully intended. But I've heard things that just, it's so shocking and disheartening, honestly.
Yeah.
To hear coming out of that community. And I love Jonda, one of the owners of Lipstick Lounge. She was telling me and whoever else I was with at the time, when she heads to Lipstick, she'll, like, tell her wife, like, I'm going to church. Like, Lipstick is church for her. Queer communities have become church for queer people, I think. I know I have felt more love from fellow queer people than
Definitely.
super religious people.
I do think, though, like, queerness aside, I have heard so many, like, my straight friends and experiences that have also been equally as bad, like, not to do with queerness at all.
Fair.
And
which is awful.
That, like...
Yeah, I hate the damage that has been done from
Yeah.
churches, and the people of our generations are certainly doing a lot of unlearning, and also just doing a lot of digging into how that shit affected them.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of unlearning. Shout out to TikTok for that. I love when I
Oh my
land
gosh,
on
yeah.
the deconstructing TikTok is one of my favorites, honestly. Once again, not knocking religious people. It's not for me. I think that's amazing if that's your thing, but I don't want a part of it at this current stage of my life.
I, like you said before, I definitely believe in something. I definitely, especially recently, have kind of been exploring, I guess, spirituality a little bit more. Yeah. But it's just in a much different way than I was raised to. So it's cool. But
yeah.
That's good, baby. Anyways, this has been the first verses.
The first verses.
Yeah.
Oh, religion.
Oh, the good old book. Is that what they say?
The good book.
The good book.
And how interesting that we were brought up so differently in that way, and we have, I don't know. Maybe that's why we are so good and have so much to talk about and stuff, because we get to talk about like our differences, and it's like now we're very similar in our thinking.
Yeah.
But we didn't grow up. We weren't brought up the same way. So I think it's so interesting. Like eventually people that put the time into it will grow up and get to have their own beliefs.
Yeah.
So
True that.
thanks for watching.
We'll
see you next week with Lyrics We Love.
Sure will.
You're a lyric I love.
Yeah.